Yeah, one of the questions that we thought we would pose
is
is
that how would I do?
is how bullshit jobs, which are sort of the pinnacle of managerial feudalism, of this highest form of capitalism, as it were, how can bullshit jobs take place in communism and even provide a sort of universal basic income uh, in one way. Um, so we wanted to start with that. I wanted to open with a great joke that's in chapter 2 that David pulls from Bill Hicks, the stand-up comedian. Boss, how come you're not working? Worker, there's nothing to do. Boss, well, you're supposed to pretend like you're working. Worker, hey, I got a better idea. You pretend to work and you get paid more. So this joke kind of encapsulates one of the phenomenons of bullshit jobs is that there's typically a certain degree of pretense or make work that goes along with it, and that is really the foundations for the kind of spiritual violence that are endemic to these sorts of jobs. That people have removed from them the sense of play where they are the cause of action and instead are mindlessly pounding rocks for no reason but to pound them. And even that is better than some jobs where the ultimate end isn't even noticeable. So I wanted to open things up with some of those sorts of thoughts on how we uh, how we navigate bullshit jobs and especially the kind of spiritual violence that goes along with them. Let me see if anyone would like to talk.
So
Either on that point or any point.
yeah, so here's Zinaida Vasilyeva, who we invited today, so we can compare useless jobs that was in the framework useless jobs had in West and in its rival, the communist, so-called communist part of the world. Zina, do you hear us?
Yeah. Hello, everybody, and yeah, I'm sorry for being a bit late. I have some issues with my emails these times.
So Zina, maybe like Steven, maybe you introduce Zina now, and then.
Or I can actually introduce myself. It's fine. I just because I missed the beginning of the conversation. Maybe you can just give me an overview. What have you already discussed, and or whether you discussed anything?
No, Steven just gave a short introduction of the second chapter and just basically quote one joke from it. But it's interesting that the second chapter, from my point of view, is a methodology of how David conducted the whole research. And he's writing there that this is, in a way, collective work. That's what struck me the most. So we didn't talk much about. Steven, do you want to summarize what was the beginning for Zinaida?
Oh yeah, I was just giving some highlights from chapter 2 about how capitalism has this tendency, as Graeber shows in his work, to create bullshit jobs, to create work that is really pretend work or make believe work, where work is being made for the sake of being made, and how that in many ways symbolizes the kind of the height of capitalism, and yet those same sorts of jobs were created under Soviet communism, And so I was just trying to set up that contrast and that simultaneous similarity between the two systems, how they can be, on paper arch rivals, but in practice can reach the same end. It's a joy having you here. Thank you for coming and agreeing to talk with us again. It's wonderful to have you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Yeah, I mean, maybe just as a quick input, what I can say is also that it's interesting to think both about indeed the similarities and the differences, and because something that can appear as similarities at the end of the day produces extremely different consequences. I think like there is a very strong narrative indeed in the late Soviet period about the meaningless work and the meaningless time spending at work. At the same time, we also have a lot of witnesses and even also in literature and the movies showing that indeed there was a kind of shared appreciation of this time spending, because this shared time spending could produce different kinds of sociality. So for example, work collectives where people are not always very busy, so to say, busy while executing particular tasks, can still be spent with some either sympathy to each other or devoted to alternative new tasks, maybe sometimes even philosophical discussions or whatever it can be, or maybe sometimes tolerance to the shopping that cannot be done in other times of the day because the shops will be closed at the same time when your working day will be closed. But my point here is that indeed this kind of time spending can produce solidarity, ironically, in the late Soviet period, and this is something that I find very interesting. So, for example, today, when we also discuss some kind of social side effects of the late Soviet Union, we also have to admit that much of it was possible only thanks to this resource of time that was available also during the working hours. And this is maybe not the same as some of the effects of the bullshit jobs in the capitalist world, let's call it this way.
I would like to say something, but I know that Michael was before me. So Michael, if you want to go.
I suppose I was just going to say, maybe one of the key points would be to figure out what is David Graeber's definition of a bullshit job in terms of the methodology that he uses, because I think that there was some confusion last time, of which off after the group on email, I got sent emails to say that suggested that I was part of that confusion, that in the sense of the like, can you be happy in a bullshit job, or what is the like the idea of jobs that are 100% bullshit versus partially bullshit. I think the term bullshit just implies, oh, well, that we must understand what it means. But that's what I would love to hear a little bit of what David Graeber says is a bullshit job and why. And then, of course, chapter 2 has all these different definitions, like here's flunkies and here is goons and here is box tickers, all these different things that must sort of fall under the idea of a bullshit job. And then that would also help compare what you would do, because I don't know whether people would I mean, a job which is a sinecure a bullshit job. A sinecure is a religious term for someone who got a post in the church that they didn't have to do anything. They were just paid money, really, and they maybe had a title or something. But like what Zena was talking about sounded like that a collective was a bit of a sinecure. You get paid some money, you're ostensibly being employed, but you just socialize with people. in a collective, that doesn't sound like it would generate the same amount of spiritual hatred for suffering as other types of jobs. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a super question. Maybe Steve should.
Yeah, Zenaida?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll be next.
Oh, no, I was just hopping on to let you know that you
to
may go.
moderate.
No, no,
I
no,
got it.
wait, I
Yeah.
think we should first answer Michael's question about the methodology and what is the David definition of bullshit jobs. I think it's like
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I can hop in there. I want to say that I don't have my copy handy, but I think it's on page 19 where he gives an ultimate definition. It's at toward the end of the first chapter, and there are a couple elements that are required in order to make a job a bullshit job. There has to be a level of deception to it. He points out that there has to be this understanding that a certain amount of work is expected, and not expected, I'm not phrasing this the right way, that the person is being asked to do work that they believe is bullshit, and that the person asking them to do ultimately sees an element of bullshit in it, because there's an element of deception, of getting away with something that he says is part of having a bullshit job.
I can read it out. It is exactly true that it is on page 19. Final working definition: a bullshit job is a form of paid employment that is so completely pointless, unnecessary, or pernicious that even the employee cannot justify its existence, even though, as part of the conditions of employment, the employee feels obliged to pretend that this is not the case.
Yeah, feels obliged.
Maybe one point here to the discussion about this definition is that indeed in the late Soviet Union, overall in the Soviet Union, the right for labor was not only a right, it was also an obligation. So actually labor and the participation in the labor market was the basic integration instrument. So like all the relations between the society and the state happened through labor processes, and that's why like one of the important argument of the Soviet government against the capitalist world was that we don't have unemployment, and indeed the unemployment rate was extremely low, and it was even criminalized. So technically, everybody was employed, had to be employed, and it was not kind of a question whether you would or you would not participate in the labor processes. In this sense, like the whole population was per definition understood as a population of producers. Like producers in the sense of kind of people participating in the industry, regardless whether they participated as, I don't know, designer processes, engineers, workers, or kind of stuff, services stuff. And I think this kind of very legal framework, which at the end of the day creates a very particular way to participate in the society building, also had then its effects, like be they positive or negative. But I think, for example, making up for demonstrating the importance of labor, for example, was irrelevant, because it's like everybody is doing it. So it's not like you have to justify why you're sitting here and occupy perhaps somebody else's job, because it's never the case. So it's never somebody else's job. And I think it's a very, very important difference compared to the way labor is organized in the capitalist world itself, where labor is in a way, well, I don't know if we can call it a privilege, but it's connected to some social security that unemployed people probably won't have, or some comfort. Well, maybe we can discuss it, but I think it's a very, very important difference.
Inka.
Yeah, I think it's clearly that in the West, the right to participate in the workforce is a privilege and the aim. And in the Soviet Union, it was an obligation, criminalized in case if you don't. So it's a famous case of Joseph Brodsky, the future Nobel laureate in literature, who was sent to 2 years to the kind of semi-prison for not officially working. He was claiming he's a translator, and he was told that he doesn't have a documentation that he's get paid as a translator. So in a way, like socialism, this monopolistic capitalism, as I call Soviet Union, they reverse the logic of West. And in the way the bullshit jobs in Soviet Union was so widespread that it's become the common sense that this is not the reality, is just the pretend. And I think that's why, just to say shortly, that's why in Soviet Union it was able to produce this different sociality that Zinaida was talking about. In West, it's not. It's produced what David called the collective scar, a scar on our collective soul, how he call it. So because everybody wants to and trained to be part of this, enthusiastic world of production in the West, there is no mechanism of how to protect yourself, psychological mechanism. So that's my understanding of these differences between West and East. Or not East, but ex-communist countries, ex-socialist countries.
I suppose it's also interesting that this is a little bit jumping ahead or maybe making something up, but like, how do we think bullshit jobs emerge? Where do they come from? And maybe the obvious one is the feeling that the person doing the bullshit job, you have to do it because it fulfills a need for someone else. Like the flunky is like someone who, is there to do office work or look important or answer the phone only so that the other person will feel important, but they don't actually need to do that work. So, but there's that circumstance is maybe I think of it as paradigmatic, but obviously there's all kinds of them. And so I suppose what types of situation in the Soviet situation are similar, that you have someone someone important that says this system works and you have to be quiet, don't complain, you all have a job, it's your obligation, and we're all happy. Is that like part of how you have a job? Does it really have the feeling of this job is bullshit?
Yes.
You're on mute.
Does anyone want to answer to Michael first?
So if I'm correct, it's David was talking about feudalism and how it's repeated the structure of feudalism, and he's very well describing this very similar scenarios that was in the medieval Europe, and that's the same things that he was talking about, one of the same possibilities about manners.
Maybe I can quickly, at least maybe not answer also Michael's question, but refer to it. So for example, one of the profession which would be often described as meaningless is the profession of engineers, but not in the sense that engineers are unimportant, but in the sense that it's such a mass profession that we have a way more of them than that we kind of rationally would need. That's why there was kind of an anecdote that where in Japan you have I don't know 3 engineers, in France you would have 5, and in the Soviet Union you would have 30 or something like that. I mean, I don't remember the numbers, but these are kind of famous jokes, so to say. So in this case, of course, we are not talking about some leadership positions, and we are probably not talking about some something that we would call today managerial professions, but we would rather refer to the mass professions, meaning that these are professions that one would get out of after an institute or a university, which is not very hard to enter and which is not very hard to be graduated from. And at the same time, it doesn't mean that all these people, they kind of come to work and see no sense in what they're doing. It rather refers that maybe the topic or the project that they work on doesn't necessarily require that many people at this specific moment, because let's say the distribution of work is not due to the rational need, but rather to the plan, which is not very flexible, is unable to be adjusted to every specific job, every specific year, every specific region, and so on and so forth, and which at the end of the day create this, so to say, extra labor vis-a-vis the task, plus the whole organization of the society, which is organized through labor. So, of course, it's the direct comparison is perhaps not even possible, because it's just a very different way of organizing work relations to the production process. And when I read David's book, I also had a feeling that for him it was important to kind of juxtapose people who manage processes and people who produce things. And he somehow kind of emphasized that this bullshit jobs are mainly concentrated where the labor is not, or let's say the products, the goods are not produced, but rather on the level when they are kind of managed. And at the same time, this management is inefficient, is expensive, and you sometimes useless, and at the end of the day, it kind of results in the frustration of both those who work and those who organize the work. Yeah. Stas, sorry that I kind of took.
No,
over.
actually, it was very welcome. I wanted to take a bit further and maybe connect it from the different angle, but now I wish you could have. You would have kept talking, and I would have come up with more interesting comment. Well, if I go with my original idea, so it is chapter 7. It is jump ahead quite a lot, but there is not obvious connection. In chapter 7, David shows a position of political left and right, and how, at least in US, I guess, the conservative right working class has this hatred of intellectuals, which resembles a hatred of engineers in at least in Soviet Union, at least superficially. But David lays out a reason in that in US it is because intellectuals are exclusively occupying self-gratifying jobs in which they can get something else except money, the personal internal satisfaction of doing something for people, for community. From the point of working class in US, they kind of usurp this kind of jobs and make it impossible for children of working class to ever get into being like movie critic or something like that. Even if American Dream promises that any hardworking person could become a millionaire, become rich, there is a possibility that that if you work hard enough, maybe you can become a capitalist. But you will never, your children will never become painters, dancers, critics, whatever. And this creates a rift that supposedly Republicans maintain and make bigger to claim both sides of it. Well, one outlet out of this situation that David demonstrates is army. Surprisingly, the only outlet where where conservative working class can find themselves engaging, doing work for community, being like doing care work, helping people, is exactly the place where you don't do market, where you go to military and military organizes all these local support things to get better with to basically score points with local population. Military does a lot of stuff for community and also for communities outside of US. That becomes a self-gratification point, the only place where you can and allowed to have it. To intellectuals then is seen as people who engaged in self-gratifying labor. If you transform it back into logic of solidarity, which was underpinning Soviet Union, you would find that the basic of logic of solidarity is no one unless everyone. So no one can be free until one of us in chain and so on. If society must do bullshit jobs, then everyone must do bullshit jobs. If you choose to only do what you like and ignore your obligation to do something that doesn't make you happy, then you kind of cheating. You have, it's like we accept the dream of the world where everyone is doing what they want, but this dream is a dream of the future where everyone is doing what they want. To do it individually is a despicable act, is a self-gratifying, like apogee of selfishness.
Thank you, Stas. Your comments reminded me about another article that David wrote about the altruism of the army, where he makes the argument, you may know the piece, that the army, the military, is a very frequently gone to place for conservatives who want to engage in caring labor, and that the military even markets it that way as a place where you can come and care for others, much the way police forces have done the same thing, as a way of co-opting this sense of wanting to provide caring labor, but linking it to the military where non-market principles prevail. Anyone else want to add on here?
I want to ask Graham, who was working on the reviews of bullshit jobs written by Western authors, and yeah, maybe he can share the one that he really liked, and so we can.
I thought we'd do that in the next
No, but
meeting.
yeah, just like the point of comparison between West and East. I don't know if you like, I'm sorry. Yeah.
It's okay. I don't know if I'm prepared to say anything right now. I'm sorry. I'll say it
Okay.
next meeting.
Yeah.
If that's okay.
No, that's definitely. Yeah.
Can
So,
I just read a quote from the book, and maybe it will spark something or continue something? I think it is somewhere around chapter 7 as well. Only those who can prove their merit at selfishness are to be afforded the right to be selfless. Or that's how game is supposed to work. If you suffer and scheme by doing so, manage to accumulate enough economic value, then you are allowed to cash in and turn your millions into something unique, higher, intangible, or beautiful. That is, turn value into values. You assemble a collection of Rembrandts or classic racing cars, or you set up a foundation and devote the rest of your life to charity. To skip straight to the end is obviously cheating.
That's a great quote. Turn value into values. Yeah.
And you're cheating if you don't suffer before you do so.
Right. Yeah. There's like this puritanical basis to capitalism and to Western society as we know it, where it is, if you've read Dawn of Everything, then you know that we live under this great theology that we are fallen creatures who can only be redeemed by working hard and then getting that elusive payoff. I don't
it's
want to
interesting.
put any more. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead, Nika.
yeah. So, Zinaida, what do you think? But am I right that Soviet Union didn't share this theology about us need to be less human, need to be redeemed through suffering, or it is?
Well, I mean, there is a topic of suffering, of course, in the, let's say, in the heroic narrative, but the heroic narrative was not very important, I would say, in the late Soviet period. So it was definitely important in the 30s, then maybe in the early post-war times. Much less, in the late period. And overall, I mean, I think I would agree actually with some of the authors who even call this the ethos of the late Soviet subject as a kind of hedonistic ethos. Not in the sense that they kind of maybe enjoy the life in like in the bodily sense, but rather in the in the sense that there is time available for doing what you want, and then the question is whether you are able to know what you want, and then to sublimate, so to say, the time into a different kind of value. But this sublimation, I don't think there was something about this kind of the point of suffering. It was rather packed in the discourse of self development, or like self-help, self-development, and something that I call in my work Samadeytelность, and which is more associated with the German concept of Selbsttätigkeit. So it's like making yourself. So and then like again, if I can add here my answer to Stas' question that he asked in the chat about how did it felt personally. Of course, it felt differently personally for different people, and some people found very or maybe organic or natural for them ways to spend this time and to, I don't know, to either to develop professionally or to develop creatively or to develop in their family. And some others were just frustrated that they cannot make more money, even though they have enough capacities, talents, and resources. So, I mean, it's always more individual. And then kind of the state regulations indeed regulated it differently for different groups of publics. So, for example, as I mentioned there in the comments, so for example, the workers, like those involved in the manual work, they were allowed to have, for example, extra hours and to take extra jobs and to earn more money, and then, for example, to transform their labor and their skills into the value, into the monetary value, which was not kind of ideologically the goal in itself in the Soviet Union, but still, which was, of course, a value. While for engineers, this option was less available, so they kind of were in a way socially pushed in the direction to transform their time as a resource into a different kind of values. Let's call them cultural values or spiritual values, but for some of them it was definitely boredom. So it was it's a question whether it's a value or not, but at least individually it's always can be experienced differently. Yeah.
Commenting from personal experience, it was very often attempt to get a land cultivated in every spare minute of free time, and then just reduce your consumption of food by substituting it by whatever you've grown in a garden, so that you get more money left.
Harold?
Hi. So I just wanted to follow up on something that Zenaida had kind of alluded to, but I was hoping to get a little bit more of a detailed kind of comparison between. My basic question is, if we think about bullshit jobs in the Soviet Union or in the present West, let's call it, or maybe just the United States, I would just kind of, I'm curious to know if the more bullshit of a job in either respective society, because one thing that I observe is it's almost like the more bullshit of a job, the higher the pay differential is between jobs that are kind of clearly like contributing something really valuable, either in the production process of goods or even the social production. And so in the same places that are the most bullshit, it's almost like in the West, there is just cushier. Not only do you not have to like get your hands dirty, or you don't have to risk exposure to something toxic in your workplace, but you also get paid more. And so I'm just kind of curious, is that the case also, or was that the case in the Soviet Union? And then before I jump off, and maybe it's just a function of, but this is kind of in response to what Stas was talking about, but my sense, and maybe this is just a function of the technology that's available to us, where we can all kind of be broadcast television stars, thanks to technologies like YouTube. But I almost suspect that Stas's perspective on the working class's availability to rise in the cultural ranks is a little bit actually not necessarily my take of that, because I almost just suspect that it's very democratized by this technology, and so you're just simply appealing, if you can appeal to a bigger crowd, you can yield all the benefits of your audience, and you're kind of, I mean, there's still a gatekeeper in the sense that you have to rely on an algorithm, and it's kind of a black box in terms of the technology of who it exposes your content to. But if you do want to rise up the ranks in capitalism as we know it now, it's probably like building an audience as an entertainment person is clearly like the most upside potential. I mean, there's, you know, so that was just kind of my reaction is to kind of, because yeah, like Stas had mentioned, film critic, and I just suspect that if anything, it's kind of, that might be mistaken. There's some other points that he made that I think were really useful, but that's just something that a point of contention I would kind of contrast with. So, but maybe we could just contrast, like, is a more bullshit job higher paid, as well as having the perks of safety and not having to get your hands dirty in the Soviet Union? That's kind of what I wanted to know from this discussion. Thank you.
Well, here definitely no, because overall the Soviet society in material sense was quite egalitarian. Yeah, so let's give you some very concrete examples. I mean, it doesn't matter what this money would mean today, but let's say an engineer who has just graduated after the university or an institute would earn 180 rubles per month. Doesn't matter what does this mean. Just remember 180s. About the same would earn a worker with a low qualification. Then relatively quickly or within several years, with more qualification, a very highly qualified worker could get up to 250. I mean, some of them could even have 300, but it's really a lot. So the difference between 180 and 300 is not a big difference, but symbolically it was a huge difference. So for the engineers, if you start with 180, let's imagine you have a dissertation, then you would probably have 230 or 220, and usually you would stop around 200, 220. So very often, actually, workers earned even more than engineers, because the manual labor was symbolically glorified, celebrated, and it was important kind of to keep this balance between intellectual labor and manual labor, also materially and financially. So what I'm trying to say is that first of all, the so-called bullshit jobs, if we would use this term for the late Soviet context, they would rather refer to the intellectual works rather than for let's say manual labor, and they would definitely not be paid more than the manual labor. If this answers your question. Because let's say those typical stereotypes about people who come to work and don't have much to do, and it's instead of working they drink tea and have conversations, or they go shopping. So they refer to the individuals working either in engineering design, maybe sometimes some kind of bureaucratic jobs, even working for the state, this kind of work. In the, let's say, office work, but office, paperwork. Of course, we wouldn't refer here, I don't know, to teachers or to doctors who have their load quite important every day.
Hey, Nika.
Yeah, so what was interesting for me in this discussion is just try to understand Soviet Union as not a bad version, not working version of the West, but as another, in a way of organizing human life, specifically because of a different attitude toward bullshit jobs. So Zinaida was talking about самодеятельность, or this self-organization, I would say, if I understood correctly from our last conversation with Zinaida also, is a lot of people were having so much free time, and also they didn't understand this free time as something that is shameful or unsuccessful, but they deliberately organize their life around this free time and mastering the skills of in different ways of how to play chess or how to play piano or, you know, whatever else. So that is what I think crucial to figure out in a way, because as we see how our current order in the West is being dismantled on our eyes, in front of our eyes, it's interesting to understand what else would be put in place and how we can use some of the previous, for example, Soviet Union examples. Although I was quite young when I saw it my parents, how they live, and I was horrified. It seems really bad that you assigned to go to work from 9 to 5, no matter what, all your life. I was lucky I born in a big city in Leningrad. Other people who were assigned to work in kolkhoz were in a much more horrible situations.
I just wanted to add to what you're saying, that we also have to remember that in Soviet Union, people worked from Monday to Saturday. You only had one day off, which was Sunday.
It was only in a particular period of time. So I mean,
Okay, maybe that's my memory.
difference. Yeah, it's very important. It's definitely not the case for the late Soviet Union.
Rob?
Yeah, what Nika said about the shame or the horrible feelings to sign to go 8, 9, 5, 8, 10 hours a day, it is a generation thing also, I guess, because this became a shift. I don't know where it does come from, but if we look at all the the understanding of this period of time through Rückkehr nach Reims, or everybody was among my friends like that. It was not necessary to be there in Leningrad. Our parents, they felt we had different interests, let's say, and we felt it useless to go out every day for that amount of time to have no other goals. This is not depending we got the chance to think different, because at this time the people, they did not get other options. I cannot remember the name at the moment. The French Literature Prize. She also said she felt shame about her part in society to came out of the working class, and nowadays I feel like these people who we put shame on them, they are in the age or to being in power, where they discuss the same situation and would like to put their life into a huge value, because many of the young people lost this value at all, to get up and to start any kind of work and to feel well through that, no matter for what reason this work will be done. And of course, I feel like Nika. I wrote it in the chat. For me, the goal was always shameless free time, shameless and a lot of time. And I did not understand that people had a problem to have this condition. I make a point because I don't know where I'm going to. Thank you.
Gerald?
Yeah, so
I thought I'm finished. I would like to finish because I don't know where to talking to.
sorry, yeah, I'll let you.
Rob, did you want to finish? Did you still have?
No, I meant I wanted to finish at this moment because I did not. I forgot where I wanted to go. I forgot
Okay.
the direction, so I made a point. That was yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Gerald.
Yeah, I think that this what something that I took from this conversation that I thought was really interesting is this idea that engineers were not allowed to moonlight, whereas laborers were allowed to take extra hours outside of the normal schedule. And it's an interesting phenomenon because it's like an implicit acknowledgement that the capital service of an engineer, or you could imagine maybe a concert pianist, saving their best work for their moonlighting job. Even though part of what makes it possible to do that great engineering task is that daytime, schedule, but sometimes what you're working on after hours is kind of your, it's hard to turn off, because you're not necessarily just chewing on a complicated engineering problem while you're at work. And so that just, to me, strikes me as like an implicit understanding that labor and capital were still at play, even though there was a very socialized equality about the at least like surface level distinctions between those occupations. So I just think that was a really interesting insight to the historical differences between the two systems.
Nika?
Yes, but so with all these differences overall, I think that was very similar arrangements where everything were the center of all value was production, because not all societies put production in the center of the universe, and it was like a power, like centralized power arrangements. And in Soviet Union, if we go through the same chapter 2, David, we can find the same duct tapers and flunkers and so on and so forth. And task managers, they just were differently arranged. So it was mostly the powers concentrated in the immediate party people. They were like the task creation managers. And then you have everybody above them. So, but it was a similar system with the little bit slightly different design. Stas?
Yeah, okay, so I think that critical point that David tries to emphasize, he comes from subjective side. That is, it doesn't really matter what you do. What matters is what it makes, what it does to you, the fact that you're doing it. And if you have like flunkies and duct tapers and so on, okay, Soviet Union took the idea of the way how labor should be organized from Marx, from whatever, from West. So obviously there will be same activities and same kind of social organizations. But the more important for this discussion is how have they been feeling about it? It only becomes bullshit job if you're doing, like, if you're being flunky and you're like really happy about being flunky, then it's fine. But the moment you feel that it destroys you from outside, you could be making the most beautiful painting, you may be saving all the kids on the planet. If you don't feel like doing it, then it's a bullshit job. So the Zina, as an expert.
I mean, of course, the retrospective discussions about feelings are always a little bit speculative, but yeah, from what we know, yeah, from memoirs or also from literature, from films, that's the whole point. That some people deal with it better than others, and also kind of the gender roles plays a role. So, for example, I remember I looked through some statistics on who are the people more involved in all kinds of leisure activities. And of course, I mean, men are more often involved, very often, because they don't have this double burden that women had. So, and then it also depends on the region, on the how well also this offer, so to say, for cultural or whatever extra activities was big. And so, for example, the big cities or small cities with universities were famous for having really rich life of all kinds of amateur clubs and so on and so forth, where people really spend a lot of time. And in a way, it was also an alternative way to socialize with their colleagues, because very often they were at the same time neighbors, colleagues, and let's say comrades of this club or of a different club. So they spend many hours together. They knew very well each other or these families. And I'm sure, so not only that I'm sure, but also from my research, I know that many of them were very happy. Some of them really kind of constituted or built the meaning of their life, not so much through their profession, but rather through this kind of additional activities, be it an amateur theater or an amateur photography club or whatever, amateur astronomy club or reading club or literature club or whatever. And remembered about these activities as something extremely meaningful, and maybe the most important things they have ever had. And they lost after the 91 because, as one of my respondents said, all of a sudden everybody became very busy. And then kind of we didn't have time for that, and somehow he doesn't even understand why. Like, I don't know why, but somehow we didn't have time for that. Because some new problems appeared. But we have reasons to say that many people felt about these activities as extremely important. We also know people who actually were very happy in their professional lives and who also spend hours for, I don't know, thinking more about their jobs or about their scientific questions or whatever. Yeah, and at the same time, definitely there were people who were also bored and unsatisfied and just dreamed to leave the country and to go to the West with a hope to become rich and to build capital with their talents. So I think it's really important to acknowledge all this diversity. Yeah, without kind of saying that without trying to paint it with one color. There were many colors.
Thank you. Let me hand it over to Nika for a minute.
Yeah, I just wanted to introduce Graham, who was collecting a review on bushy jobs around the internet. So maybe I propose, if everybody agree, next time to maybe go over that and see what are the opinions out there, including a negative one, critique of the book, and so on, available. And then I suggest maybe for the future groups, we can invite some of these people who read the reviews to join us as well. But so Graham, maybe you talk a little bit about what your help.
Sorry, what do you want me to say? Just about like some of
Just about
the reviews that I came across. Okay, wait. Can you just give me a moment so I can like just bring them up? Sorry, I'm not organized.
So are these like reviews that the just by people reading it, or reviews by anthropologists and kind of the social scientists?
They're mostly just reviews like that I found, like it's not academic reviews. I would say.
It's also quite interesting that like how many academics slightly disliked this book.
Yeah. Wait.
Because that's an unusual methodology. That's interesting that the second chapter was about methodology. And I'm not an anthropologist, so I don't know how this methodology is actually legitimate.
I mean, the discussion on the methodology is the fact that people decide themselves whether or not it's a bullshit job. And so then a bunch of people are like, well, how can someone decide themselves? Because that's subjective. How can you not have an objective answer? Is it a bullshit job or is it not? And so that is the kind of that's the debate. And I think personally, when you broaden out and you let all kinds of people decide like what they feel, then you ultimately get a quite objective answer in the sense that you have a huge number of people remarking on that type of thing, and that gets you kind of a result. But the thing is when people get confused because they say like, okay, is that job a bullshit job if that person decides it's a bullshit job? What happens if the person changes their mind? Or what happens if somebody else thinks it's a bullshit job? So all of those things are the kind of rough and the scuff of meaning. It's like it's the whole thing's quantized rather than smooth and flowing and definite. So you get those odd circumstances, but I do think in a big picture, that all levels up to be actually a really useful method. We don't have much time because I guess it's past 9 now, but we could definitely spend more time in the future talking about that methodology.
Yeah.
But maybe in this case, so just a second, maybe we can ask Graham, who now have like the best knowledge of so many reviews. Maybe we can ask him to identify the most critical review and the most praisal review, and then try to invite the people from the different point of view to discuss it here. Would
Yeah.
be interesting.
You want me to decide that right now, which is the most critical?
No,
and the
no,
most
no, I'm not. It's like it's take preparation.
I mean, he said he would do it next time, right?
Yeah.
Didn't have a lot of
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I think who was just speaking? Is that John? Sorry. No, Michael, sorry. Yeah, something I read said basically what you said, and it was an economist saying that that a person can't decide whether their job is bullshit or not because they can't see the whole picture. Yeah, and that is that no bullshit job exists, that every job has a purpose, and as of course as an economist, that's how the world looks like. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense, because if it weren't rational, then it would have no need to exist, according to the thinking of an economist. This is just pure rational choice, hogwash.
Yeah.
Zina, thank you so much for coming. That was fantastic. Really nice to see a Soviet counterpart to a phenomenon that's happened here in the West. So thank you. I hope you're able to come to future discussions as well. So our next meeting is January 18th, the third Thursday in that month. Hope to see everyone there, and where we will hear from Graham about the reviews and perhaps have someone joining us if possible. That would be amazing. Okay, so thank you, everyone. It's been great seeing all of you. Take care.